She was 6 years old. All unadulterated joy and untamed laughter. Just a kid reveling in a perfect Saturday afternoon on the playground. The kind of afternoon memories are made of, the kind you wish could last forever. But then the idyllic scene shattered. Her stepmother, a woman who always seemed to carry herself with an air of icy perfection, reached into her designer purse and withdrew a belt. Not just any belt, but a thick, expensive leather one. The heavy brass buckle glinting menacingly in the harsh desert sun. The little girl, mid-swing on the monkey bars, froze. Her innocent joy evaporated in an instant, replaced by a terror so profound it seemed to steal the very air from her lungs. 20 adults populated that Albuquerque park that day, 20 potential saviors. 20 witnesses to what was about to unfold. And every single one of them averted their gaze, feigning sudden interest in their phones or their own children, desperate to avoid involvement. All except us. 6 Hells Angels, our motorcycles still radiating heat from the ride. The chrome gleaming under the New Mexico sun. We saw the belt raised, its shadow lengthening across the playground. We saw the child's face, the stark, heart-wrenching fear etched onto her features. And in that moment we made a choice. A choice that would ripple outwards, irrevocably altering all of our lives. 3 months have passed since that day. Now, I'm sitting in a nondescript coffee shop, the aroma of roasted beans doing little to soothe my fraying nerves. I'm waiting to meet my daughter, Emma, who hasn't spoken to me in 8 long years. I can't help but wonder, can protecting one child, finally doing the right thing, somehow atone for failing another? The late afternoon sun bathes the Sandia Mountains in hues of burnt orange and deep purple, casting long, dancing shadows across Roosevelt Park in Albuquerque's International District. The brutal heat of the day, a scorching 98 degrees, has finally begun to relent, dropping to a more tolerable 85. Families are tentatively emerging from their air-conditioned homes, like desert creatures cautiously venturing out after the oppressive heat. Silas Garrett sat alone on his Harley-Davidson Softail in the parking lot adjacent to the playground, the setting sun reflecting off the polished chrome. His weathered leather vest, bearing the distinctive death head patch of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, hung heavy on his shoulders. At 43, his face was a roadmap of a life lived hard. A jagged scar bisected his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a long-ago bar fight in Tucson. Deep crow's feet were etched around his eyes, the permanent legacy of years squinting against the relentless desert sun. And a single stark gray streak ran through his dark beard, a grim reminder of the year his daughter stopped speaking to him. He wasn't here for nostalgia, wasn't indulging in sentimental memories of a happier past. He'd pulled over because his bike was running hot, the engine ticking ominously, a sound that suggested the cooling system needed some serious attention before he could safely make the ride back to the clubhouse on 4th Street. The sound of children's laughter drifted across the parking lot, a melody that both soothed and tormented him. Silas had learned to tune out most ambient noise, the blare of sirens, the relentless drone of traffic, the constant hum of city life. But children's laughter was different. It was a direct line to the past, a painful reminder of Emma, his daughter, before the divorce, before the bitter custody battle, before she'd started looking at him with fear and distrust instead of love and adoration. He was trying desperately not to look at the playground, trying to focus instead on the engine temperature gauge. When he heard it, the laughter changed. It took on a specific quality, a note of pure, unrestrained joy. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, was running through the playground with 3 other children, playing some kind of chase game that only made sense within the strange, beautiful logic of childhood. She had dark, curly hair pulled into 2 lopsided ponytails, a purple t-shirt emblazoned with a cartoon character he didn't recognize, and pink sneakers that lit up with each joyful step. Her laugh was loud, infectious, carrying across the park with a volume that suggested she'd completely forgotten that the entire world existed beyond this single, perfect moment. Silas found himself watching her, despite his better judgment. The girl reminded him so much of Emma at that age. The same unself-conscious joy, the same boundless energy, the same remarkable ability to be completely and utterly present in the moment. He checked his phone. 5:30 p.m. The engine had cooled down enough. He should leave. He should just get back on his bike and ride away. That's when he saw the woman. She emerged from a silver Honda CR-V parked 3 spaces down from his bike, moving with the rigid, controlled posture of barely suppressed rage. She was in her early 30s, with blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her features, giving her a perpetually pinched expression. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized designer t-shirt that probably cost more than most people in this neighborhood made in a single day. Her face was flushed, her jaw clenched tight, and she was walking directly towards the playground with a purpose that set Silas's instincts screaming. The little girl with the curly hair saw her, and the laughter died instantly. The transformation was immediate and heartbreaking, a swift descent from carefree joy to abject terror in the span of a single breath. The other children scattered like startled birds, suddenly remembering they had urgent appointments somewhere else. Mila! The woman's voice cut across the park like a whip crack, shattering the peaceful evening air. Get over here now. The child froze on the playground equipment, her small hands gripping the cold metal of the monkey bars. I was just playing, Belle. The other kids. I told you to stay quiet. I told you I had a headache, but you just had to make all that noise. Didn't you? The woman, Belle, reached the edge of the playground. She opened her large, expensive designer purse and pulled out something that made Silas's blood run cold. A belt, thick leather, with a heavy brass buckle that caught the fading light of the late afternoon sun, transforming it into a weapon. Silas was off his bike before he consciously decided to move. His years of riding had honed his reflexes to a razor's edge. Mila climbed down from the monkey bars with the careful, deliberate movements of a child who'd learned the hard way that sudden actions could make things much, much worse. Her bottom lip trembled, but she wasn't crying yet. She'd learned that lesson too. Crying only made it worse. I'm sorry, Mila whispered, her voice barely audible. I forgot. I'll be quiet now. You're always sorry, Belle said, her voice cold and flat, devoid of any emotion. Sorry doesn't change anything. You embarrassed me again. People were staring because you were being so loud. Silas had crossed half the distance between his bike and the playground. Several other adults in the park had noticed the confrontation, but they were doing that thing people do, the collective act of willful blindness. They were looking away, suddenly fascinated by their phones, herding their own children in different directions, desperate to avoid any involvement. The bystander effect, psychologists called it. Silas called it cowardice. Belle grabbed Mila's arm, her manicured nails digging into the child's thin bicep, hard enough to leave marks. She raised the belt, the brass buckle gleaming ominously in the fading light. Please, Mila whimpered, her voice small and filled with despair. I'll be good, promise. The belt reached the apex of its arc, poised to strike. In another second it would come crashing down. Silas's voice, roughened by decades of cigarettes and desert dust, carried across the playground with absolute authority. Don't. Belle froze, the belt still raised, and turned to look at him. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in his appearance. The leather vest, the patches, the unmistakable symbols of the Hell's Angels. For a fleeting moment, genuine fear flickered across her face. Then it hardened into a mask of defensive anger. This is none of your business, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. This is my stepdaughter. I'm allowed to discipline her. Silas stopped 10 feet away, his posture relaxed, but his eyes were ice cold. Put the belt down, or what? Belle's hand tightened on the belt, but she didn't lower it. You're going to threaten me in front of all these people? Silas pulled out his phone without breaking eye contact. I'm going to call the police. And while we wait for them, I'm going to make damn sure that Belle doesn't touch that little girl. Your choice how difficult you want to make this. Belle's face flushed a deeper shade of red. You can't. She's not yours. This is parenting. Kids need discipline. Discipline and abuse aren't the same thing, Silas said quietly, his voice dangerous. And you know the difference. Mila had gone very still, her wide eyes darting back and forth between Silas and Belle, like she was watching a high-stakes tennis match that would determine her fate. Tears were streaming down her cheeks now, but she wasn't making a sound. She'd learned to suffer in silence. Silas took one step closer, and Belle took one step back. The belt was still raised, but her arm was trembling slightly. She was calculating, weighing her options, trying to determine how far she could push this. Silas could see it in her eyes. That's when Silas heard the sound that changed everything. The unmistakable rumble of Harley-Davidson engines. Multiple bikes coming from the direction of 4th Street. 5 motorcycles rolled into the parking lot in formation. A symphony of roaring steel and raw power. Weston, Brooks, Ezekiel, Roman, and Axel, all wearing their colors, all brothers from the same chapter. They'd been heading back from a run to Santa Fe when Silas had texted them 60 seconds ago with a single word. Help! The bikes lined up next to Silas's Softail, engines idling in a synchronized rumble that seemed to vibrate the very air. 5 men dismounted, all wearing leather vests with identical patches, all moving with the coordinated purpose of people who'd ridden together for years. Belle's face went ashen. The belt lowered slightly. Weston, the road captain, was the first to speak. He was 51, with a completely shaved head and a handlebar mustache that had gone completely gray. We got a problem here, brother? Silas kept his eyes locked on Belle. Lady's about to beat a little girl with a belt in public. I suggested she reconsider. The 5 men formed a loose semicircle, not threatening, not advancing, just present, just witnesses. Belle's voice came out strangled. This is insane. You can't do this. There's 6 of you. This is intimidation. No, ma'am, Ezekiel said softly. He was the youngest of them at 34, with kind eyes that had seen too much combat in Afghanistan. This is intervention. There's a difference. The belt finally dropped completely. Belle's hand was shaking now, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She was cornered and she knew it. 6 witnesses, all of whom would testify to exactly what they'd seen, all of whom had pulled out their phones and were recording. You're all going to regret this, Belle said. But there was no conviction in her voice now, just desperation. I'll call the police myself. I'll tell them you threatened me. Please do, Brooks said. He was 47, a former accountant before the club became his life, and he spoke with the calm precision of someone who understood exactly how the law worked. We'd love to explain to them what we witnessed. I'm sure Child Protective Services would be very interested, too. Mila was crying openly now, still frozen in place, not fully understanding what was happening, but sensing the shift in power dynamics. Silas crouched down slowly, making himself less threatening, and looked at the little girl. Hey, Mila? He said gently. You okay? The child nodded, but fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Where's your dad? Silas asked, keeping his voice soft. He's working, Mila whispered. He works at the hospital. He doesn't come home until late. Belle made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. Of course. Call Connor. Tell him his precious daughter was being a brat again. See if he believes her over me. Silas stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Belle's face. Something had shifted in his expression. A deeper, colder anger than before. He doesn't know, does he? You do this when he's not around. Belle's silence was answer enough. The sun had dropped lower behind the Sandia Mountains, painting the parking lot in shades of amber and shadow. The playground was empty now, except for the 3 of them and the 6 men in leather vests. In the distance, a siren wailed, but it was heading in a different direction. Silas made a decision. He looked at Weston, then at the others and saw the same thought reflected in their eyes. This wasn't over. This couldn't be over. Because if they rode away now, if they left this child with this woman, the belt would come down the moment they were out of sight. Some codes didn't need to be spoken aloud. Some responsibilities didn't need to be assigned. The strong defend the defenseless no matter the cost. Belle, Silas said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of unspoken threat. You're going to get in your car. You're going to drive away. And you're not going to touch that little girl. Not today. Not ever again. You can't. Belle started, her voice rising in panic. Hit her again. Silas interrupted, his voice carrying a promise that was absolutely not a threat. Absolutely not violence, but absolutely certain. I dare you. The belt slipped from Belle's fingers and hit the ground with a soft thump that seemed impossibly loud in the desert evening. Connor Hayes stood in the emergency department break room at Presbyterian Hospital, staring at his phone like it might explode. 3 missed calls from an unknown number, 2 voicemails, and a text message from his neighbor Violet that read, something happened at the park with Mila. She's okay. But you need to come home now. His shift didn't end for another 4 hours. He was an ER nurse, and Saturday evenings were always chaos. Car accidents, domestic disputes, alcohol poisoning, the entire spectrum of human suffering compressed into a 12-hour window. They were already short-staffed because 2 nurses had called in sick, and leaving early would mean abandoning his team when they needed him most. But Mila was okay. Violet had said she was okay. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Connor's hands were shaking as he dialed Violet's number. She picked up on the first ring. Connor, thank God. Listen, I don't want to freak you out. But what happened? Connor's voice came out harder than he intended. Is Mila hurt? No, she's fine. She's here with me. But Belle. Violet paused, and Connor could hear her choosing her words carefully. Belle tried to discipline her at the park with a belt. In front of everyone. The break room seemed to tilt sideways. Connor sat down hard on one of the plastic chairs. The phone pressed so tight to his ear it hurt. She what? Some bikers intervened. Hell's Angels. They stopped it before it happened. They made sure Mila was safe. Connor. I've been telling you for months that something wasn't right with how Belle treats her when you're at work. Connor's mind was racing, sifting through memories he'd been trying to ignore. Mila had been quieter lately, more withdrawn. There had been bruises on her arms that Belle explained away as playground accidents. There had been the way Mila flinched when Belle raised her voice. All the signs he'd been too tired, too overworked, too desperate to believe that his second marriage was working to really see. Where is she now? Connor asked, his voice barely a whisper. Where's Belle? She left. The bikers. Connor, I know how this sounds, but they stayed with Mila until I could get to the park. They made sure she was safe. One of them, older guy named Silas. He gave me his number in case you wanted to call him. He gave you his number? Connor repeated numbly. They witnessed the whole thing. They have it on video. Connor, if you want to file a report with CPS or the police, they said they'd testify. All 6 of them. 6 Hell's Angels willing to testify against his wife. The situation was so surreal that Connor almost laughed. Almost. But Mila was with Violet safe. And Belle was where? At their house? At her mother's? Somewhere plotting her defense. I'm coming home, Connor said. His voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. Tell Mila I'm coming home right now. Connor. I know you're scheduled until. I don't care. Tell her I'm coming. He hung up and found his charge nurse, a woman named Addison, who'd worked in emergency medicine for 30 years and had seen everything twice. He explained the situation in brief clinical terms. Family emergency. Daughter unsafe. Needed to leave immediately. Addison didn't hesitate. Go. We'll cover. Family first. Connor was in his car 7 minutes later, driving through Albuquerque traffic with his emergency flashers on, breaking every speed limit between the hospital and his house in the Northeast Heights. His phone kept buzzing with texts from Belle. Asterisk, where are you? We need to talk about what happened. Those men threatened me. Mila was being completely out of control. I was just trying to discipline her like we agreed. We never agreed, Connor thought, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Asterisk, we never agreed to hit her. We never agreed to terrorize her. He'd met Belle 2 years ago, 6 months after his divorce from Emma's mother became final. Belle had seemed perfect, a successful real estate agent, financially independent, interested in settling down. She'd been patient with Mila in the beginning, understanding about the complexities of blended families. When had it changed? Or had he simply refused to see it? Connor pulled up to Violet's house, a modest single-story adobe in the same neighborhood as his own. Violet was 67, a retired teacher who'd lived on their street for 40 years and knew everyone's business. She was waiting on the porch. She's inside watching cartoons, Violet said quietly. I gave her some cookies and told her you were coming. Connor, she's scared. Not of those bikers. They were gentle with her. She's scared of going home. Connor's chest tightened. Can I see her? Violet led him inside to the living room, where Mila sat on an overstuffed couch that was probably older than Connor. A plate of chocolate chip cookies sat untouched beside her. She looked so small, so fragile, still wearing the purple shirt and pink light-up sneakers from the park. When she saw Connor, her face crumpled, and she launched herself off the couch into his arms. Daddy! She sobbed into his shoulder, her small body shaking with the force of her crying. Daddy, I was just laughing. I was just playing. I didn't mean to be too loud. Connor held her tight, his own eyes burning. I know, baby. I know. You didn't do anything wrong. Belle said I embarrassed her. She said I'm always too loud. Mila's voice broke. She had the belt. Daddy, she was going to. I know, Connor whispered, stroking her curly hair, but she didn't. Those men stopped her. You're safe now. Are you mad at me? The question broke something inside Connor's chest. No, sweetheart. I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you at all. They sat like that for several minutes while Violet discreetly disappeared into the kitchen. When Mila's sobs had quieted to occasional hiccups, Connor gently pulled back to look at her. Mila, I need you to tell me the truth. Has Belle hurt you before? When I'm at work. The child's silence was devastating. She looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers together in the way she did when she was anxious. Mila, Connor said gently, you can tell me. You won't get in trouble. Promise. She pulls my hair sometimes, Mila whispered, her voice barely audible. When I'm too slow getting ready for school, and she squeezes my arm really hard when I forget to be quiet. And one time she locked me in my room for the whole day because I spilled juice on her laptop. Connor felt something dark and furious rising in his chest. A rage so pure and focused that it scared him. But Mila was watching his face, waiting for his reaction. And he knew he had to stay calm for her. Thank you for telling me, Connor said, keeping his voice steady. You were very brave. And I promise you, Belle is never going to hurt you again. Is she going to go away? Mila asked in a small voice. Yes, Connor said, the decision crystallizing even as he spoke. She's going to go away. Violet returned from the kitchen with a glass of water and set it gently on the coffee table. Connor, that biker, Silas. He said to call him if you needed anything. He said his chapter has connections with family law attorneys. Pro bono work for cases like this. Connor looked up at Violet, then down at his daughter, then at the piece of paper Violet held out with a phone number written in careful handwriting. Hell's Angels offering legal help. A stepmother who terrorized children. A father who'd been too blind to see what was happening in his own home. The world had tilted on its axis, and Connor wasn't sure which way was up anymore. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Mila would never be hurt again. Not on his watch. Not ever. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number. Silas answered on the second ring. This is Silas. This is Connor Hayes, Connor said. Mila's father. I understand I owe you and your friends a debt I can never repay. There was a pause. Then Silas's gravelly voice. You don't owe us anything, brother. We did what anyone should do. But if you want to talk about keeping that little girl safe, I know some people who can help. I want to talk, Connor said, looking at Mila's tear-stained face. I want to do whatever it takes. Meet me tomorrow morning, Silas said. Route 66 Diner on Central. 8 a.m. Bring your daughter if she's comfortable. We'll figure this out. Why are you doing this? Connor asked. You don't know us. Another pause, longer this time. When Silas spoke again, his voice was rougher, laced with a pain Connor could almost feel. I have a daughter too. Haven't seen her in 8 years. I wasn't there when she needed protection, but I can be there for other people's kids. That's enough. Connor closed his eyes. 8 a.m. tomorrow. We'll be there. After he hung up, Connor sat with Mila on Violet's couch, holding her while she dozed against his shoulder, exhausted from crying. His phone kept buzzing with messages from Belle, each one more desperate than the last. He didn't read them. Outside, the sun had set completely, and Albuquerque's city lights were beginning to glow against the darkening desert sky. Somewhere out there, 6 men in leather vests were going about their evening, probably never thinking twice about what they'd done at the park. But Connor would think about it for the rest of his life. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was his attorney, a woman named Naomi, who'd handled his first divorce. He texted her while driving from the hospital. A brief message. * emergency. Need to file for divorce and protective order tomorrow. Call when you can. She called back within minutes. Connor. Naomi's voice was all business. Tell me everything. So he did. The belt, the park, the Hells Angels, Mila's quiet confession about months of abuse. Naomi listened without interrupting, and Connor could hear her typing notes. Okay, she said when he finished. First thing Monday morning, we file for emergency divorce and a temporary restraining order. The video evidence from those bikers will be crucial. We'll need their testimony. They said they'd testify, Connor said. Good. Second, we contact CPS. With this many witnesses, they'll have to investigate. Third, you need to document everything. Take photos of any bruises on Mila. Write down everything she told you, with dates and times as best you can remember. Connor looked down at Mila's arms, where faint finger-shaped bruises were visible even in Violet's dim living room light. He felt sick. Connor, Naomi said gently, this isn't your fault. I should have seen it, Connor said. I should have known. Abusers are good at hiding. That's what makes them dangerous. But you know now and you're taking action. That's what matters. Your daughter is going to be okay. After they hung up, Connor carefully lifted Mila and carried her out to his car. Violet had packed the untouched cookies in a container and pressed them into his hand with a fierce hug. You're a good father, Violet whispered. Don't you forget that. The drive home was short. Connor half expected to see Belle's car in the driveway, but the house was dark and empty. He carried Mila inside, tucked her into her bed, still wearing her park clothes because he didn't want to wake her, and sat in the chair beside her bed, watching her sleep. At some point during the night, his phone buzzed one final time. A text from Silas. * your daughter's got people looking out for her now. Not just you. Brotherhood means something. See you tomorrow. Connor typed back. Thank you. The response came immediately. * no thanks needed. Is what we do. Connor set his phone on the nightstand and leaned back in the chair, exhausted, but unable to sleep. Tomorrow he'd meet with Silas. Monday he'd start legal proceedings. The road ahead would be complicated, long, and painful, but he knew he couldn't back down. The fate of his daughter depended on it. And painful as it was, Mara was safe tonight, and that was all that mattered. The Route 66 diner on Central Avenue, a beacon of neon and nostalgia, had been slinging greasy breakfast plates and brewing extra-strong coffee for Albuquerque's blue-collar crowd since way back in '47. Stepping inside was like hitting rewind on a time machine. The place hadn't changed a lick in 75 years. Gleaming chrome-trimmed booths sported bright red vinyl seats worn smooth by countless occupants. A long, serpentine counter, lined with spinning chrome stools, anchored the space, while the walls served as a gallery of vintage photographs. A sepia-toned homage to old Albuquerque, back when Route 66 was still the mother road, and the city was nothing more than a dusty railroad town. Silas, a hulking figure in faded denim and worn leather, occupied a corner booth at 7:45 a.m., nursing his third cup of black coffee, the bitter brew a necessary fuel for the day ahead. His eyes, hardened by years of riding and hard knocks, constantly scanned the entrance. Weston, a man built like a brick outhouse, sat across from him, methodically dismantling a plate of huevos rancheros. He ate with the single-minded efficiency of someone who'd learned to consume every available calorie, a skill honed from long stretches on the road. The other four brothers, Brooks, Ezekiel, Roman, and Axel, held court in the adjacent booth. They spread out like a biker gang version of the Secret Service, their own breakfast plates and coffee mugs forming a protective perimeter, subtle yet unmistakable. You think he'll show? Weston grunted, using a tortilla to mop up the last vestiges of egg yolk and fiery salsa. He'll show, Silas said, his voice gravelly. The man sounded determined, desperate even on the phone. Bringing the kid was smart, Brooks observed, not looking up from his perusal of the Sunday paper, but clearly listening to the conversation. Shows he trusts us? Or at least trusts us more than he trusts leaving her alone. Ezekiel, a brooding presence who usually kept to himself, finally spoke up, his voice laced with a note of caution. You sure about this? Getting involved in domestic situations is like opening Pandora's box. Things can get complicated, and fast. The club's already got enough legal heat without adding family court drama into the mix. Silas fixed him with a level stare that could cut steel. You want to walk it back? Tell me you would have just ridden past that park yesterday. Ezekiel held up his hands, palms open in a gesture of surrender. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we need to be smart about how deep we wade into this mess. There's helping someone, and then there's becoming responsible for outcomes we can't control. The man asked for help. Roman interjected, his soft voice a surprising contrast to his linebacker-esque physique. The code says we don't turn our backs on people who need it. Code also says we protect the club first. Ezekiel countered, his tone still mild. They weren't arguing, not really, just working through the angles, hashing out the possibilities like they'd done 1,000 times before on long runs and tough business decisions. The diner door swung open at 7:53, a chime announcing Connor Hayes' arrival. He was holding Mila's hand. The little girl looked significantly better than she had yesterday. Her curly dark hair was neatly brushed and pulled back with a bright pink headband, and she was wearing fresh clothes and her beloved light-up sneakers. There was a definite flush of color in her cheeks. Still, she clung tightly to her father's leg, her eyes wide with apprehension as she took in the sight of 6 burly men in leather vests occupying 2 booths. Silas stood up slowly, consciously trying to make himself appear as non-threatening as possible. Connor, I'm Silas. We spoke on the phone. Connor approached cautiously, a palpable wave of protective instinct radiating from every tense muscle. He was of medium height, his lean frame betraying the long, grueling hours of nursing shifts. Tired eyes, framed by dark circles, suggested a distinct lack of sleep. Up close, Silas could see the clear resemblance between father and daughter, the same dark, curly hair, the same almond shape to their eyes. Thank you for meeting us, Connor said, his voice tight with formality. This is Mila. Hi, Mila, Silas said gently, crouching down to the girl's eye level. I'm glad to see you're okay. You remember me from yesterday, right? Mila nodded, then surprised everyone by saying, in a small but clear voice, you stopped Belle. You and your friends. That's right, Silas confirmed, a warm smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. And we're going to make sure she can't scare you anymore. Is that okay with you? Another nod, more emphatic this time. Connor's hand tightened on his daughter's shoulder, a complex mix of gratitude and grief warring on his face. Please sit, Silas said, gesturing towards the booth. Connor and Mila slid in across from him and Weston. A waitress, a woman with decades of experience and a perceptive eye, appeared almost immediately, and Connor ordered pancakes for Mila and coffee for himself. Once they were settled, Silas made introductions. The big guy across from you is Weston, our road captain. Next booth over is Brooks, Ezekiel, Roman, and Axel. We're all from the same chapter, all brothers. I appreciate you all being here, Connor said, though his body language remained tense and guarded. I spoke with my attorney yesterday. She said your testimony and the video would be crucial for obtaining a restraining order and winning custody. You'll have it, Weston said immediately, his voice a rumbling assurance. All 6 of us will testify to exactly what we saw. We've already sent the video to our own lawyer to make sure the chain of custody is documented properly. Connor blinked, clearly surprised. You have a lawyer for the club? We're a motorcycle club, not a gang of criminals, Brooks said dryly from the next booth. Despite what the media likes to portray, we have legal representation, tax filings, liability insurance, the whole 9 yards. I didn't mean to imply, Connor began, flustered. People make assumptions, Silas said, waving it off. We're used to it. The leather vests and patches scare people, but we're just men who ride motorcycles and look out for each other. And sometimes for people who need it. Mila's pancakes arrived, a stack of golden goodness drizzled with syrup. She dug in with the unbridled enthusiasm of a child who likely hadn't eaten much the day before. Connor watched her eat with visible relief washing over him. Can I ask you something? Connor said, looking from Silas to Weston, his expression earnest. Why did you get involved? I mean, really, you could have just called the police and walked away. Silas was quiet for a moment, carefully choosing his words. You know about the bystander effect, right? How the more people witness something, the less likely anyone is to intervene because they all think someone else will handle it. Connor nodded. That's how evil wins, Silas said flatly. Not through some grand conspiracy, but through good people convincing themselves it's not their problem. There were 20 adults in that park yesterday. 20. And they all looked away when that woman pulled out a belt. Every single one except us. We ride together. We fight together. We look out for each other. Weston added. That's the whole foundation of the club. But looking out for each other doesn't mean turning a blind eye to everyone else, especially kids. Ezekiel leaned forward from the next booth, his gaze intense. My sister's kid, my nephew, he was being abused by his stepfather. None of us knew. He hid it for 2 years before it got so bad he ended up in the hospital. Broken ribs, cigarette burns. The kid was 9 years old. Connor's face went pale, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for his coffee. Was the stepfather arrested? Eventually, Ezekiel said, his voice hardening with suppressed fury. After permanent damage was done. After my nephew developed PTSD and anxiety disorders he'll deal with for the rest of his life. I swore then that if I ever saw a kid in trouble, I wouldn't look away. None of us will. Mila had stopped eating and was listening intently, her wide eyes moving between the adults. Connor noticed and gently squeezed her hand. Hey sweetie, why don't you see if they have a coloring menu? I bet they do. The waitress, who'd been hovering protectively nearby, clearly recognizing the gravity of the conversation, immediately appeared with crayons and a kid's menu featuring cartoon Route 66 scenes to color. Mila accepted them gratefully and bent over her project, her brow furrowed in concentration. With Mila occupied, Connor leaned forward, his voice low. My attorney wants to file for emergency divorce and a temporary restraining order tomorrow morning. She said with your testimony and the video we have a strong case. But Belle's already messaging me, saying she'll fight for custody, that I'm being manipulated, that you all threatened her. Let her try, Brooks said, a glint of steel in his eyes. He pulled out a tablet and opened a video file. This is what actually happened. No audio manipulation, no editing. 6 separate angles from 6 phones, all time-stamped. He paused the video, showing a clear frame of Belle Stevens raising the belt high above her head. She raised a belt to strike a child in a public park. That's assault on a minor. The fact that we intervened before the blow landed doesn't change her intent. Connor watched the video, his jaw clenching tighter with each passing second. When it finished, he looked as if he might be sick. She's done, he said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. With that evidence, she's done. Don't underestimate what money can buy, Weston cautioned. If she's got resources, she can hire attorneys who will try to spin this as overzealous parenting or claim she was provoked. They'll try to paint us as the aggressors. Can they do that? Connor asked, alarmed. They can try, Silas said. But the truth is the truth, and we've got 20 years of community service work, charity runs, and veteran support programs that prove we're not the villains here. Roman spoke up from the next booth. We also have character witnesses. I'm a registered nurse at UNM Hospital. Brooks is a CPA. Axel owns a construction company. We're not outlaws. We're businessmen and professionals who happen to ride Harleys. And I'm unemployed with a record, Silas added bluntly. Which is why I probably shouldn't be your primary witness, but I'm the one who made first contact, so I'll testify to what I saw. The others will carry more weight with a judge. Connor looked at Silas with something akin to understanding. You mentioned on the phone that you have a daughter. Had. Silas corrected quietly, a shadow crossing his face. In the sense that I haven't seen her in 8 years. My ex-wife remarried, moved to Oregon, and Emma decided she didn't want contact with me anymore. Court supported her decision. She was 13 at the time, old enough to choose. I'm sorry, Connor said sincerely. Silas shrugged, but the pain was clearly visible in his eyes. I made my choices. Chose the club over family when I should have found balance. Emma paid the price for my priorities. So now I try to do better when I can. It doesn't change the past, but maybe it means something for the future. Mila looked up from her coloring, her small face etched with concern. Does your daughter know you help people? The entire table went quiet. Silas met the child's eyes, so direct, so honest in the way only children can be. No, sweetheart, he said gently. She doesn't know, but maybe someday she'll hear about it and think better of her old man. That'd be nice. Mila considered this, then went back to coloring, but something had undeniably shifted in the booth. A recognition of shared wounds, shared losses, shared attempts at redemption. Connor pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. My attorney needs contact information for all of you. Names, phone numbers, addresses. She'll be in touch about depositions this week. They spent the next 20 minutes going over logistics, coordinating schedules. Weston, ever the organized road captain, ensured at least 3 of them would be available at any given time for legal meetings. Brooks offered to review Connor's financial documents to help prepare for the divorce proceedings. Ezekiel, who'd served in the military police before Afghanistan, volunteered to coordinate with the Albuquerque Police Department to file a formal report about the park incident. By the time they finished, Mila had completed 3 coloring pages, and Connor had pages of notes. The diner had filled up with the Sunday morning crowd. Families fresh from church, older couples reading newspapers, truckers passing through on their way to Texas or California. As they stood to leave, Connor held out his hand to Silas, his grip firm and grateful. I don't know how to thank you properly, all of you. Silas shook his hand, his gaze unwavering. Seeing that little girl smile is thanks enough. You keep her safe. We'll help however we can, and that's the end of it. It's not the end though, is it? Connor said, his voice laced with weariness. Belle's going to fight this. She's not going to just walk away. Let her fight, Weston said, standing tall. We've dealt with worse than angry ex-wives. Mila tugged on Silas's vest, her small hand clutching the worn leather. He looked down at her, his weathered face softening. Can I ask you something? Sure, honey. If Belle comes back, will you stop her again? Silas crouched down to her level, his gaze intense. Yes, if she comes anywhere near you, we'll stop her. And so will your dad and the police and the lawyers and everyone else who knows what she did. You've got a whole army protecting you now. Mila processed this, then threw her small arms around Silas's neck in an impulsive hug. Silas froze for half a second, the unexpected contact momentarily startling him. He couldn't remember the last time a child had hugged him voluntarily, then carefully, awkwardly, returned the embrace. When Mila pulled back, she was smiling. A real smile. The kind he'd seen on the playground yesterday, before fear had replaced joy. Connor and Mila left the diner, walking a little taller, a little less afraid. Through the window, the 6 bikers watched them cross the parking lot to Connor's car. We're in this now, Ezekiel observed, his voice a low rumble. All the way in. Were we ever not? Roman asked, his gaze never leaving the retreating figures. Silas drained the last of his coffee and set the mug down on the table, the ceramic clinking softly against the formica surface. Some things you just can't walk away from. Some lines you can't unsee being crossed. We all knew that the moment we pulled into that parking lot yesterday. Brotherhood, Axel said simply, the word hanging in the air. Brotherhood. The others echoed, their voices resonating with shared conviction. It was a word that meant different things to different people. To some, it meant blood family. To others, it signified military units or fraternal organizations. To the 6 men in that booth, it meant something both simpler and more profound. Showing up when it mattered, standing witness to injustice, and refusing to look away when someone needed protection. They paid their bill, leaving a generous tip for the observant waitress, and walked out into the bright Albuquerque morning. Their bikes sat in a row in the parking lot, chrome gleaming in the desert sun like a squadron of steel steeds ready for battle. Tomorrow, the legal battle would begin. But today, a little girl was safe, and that was victory enough. The law offices of Martinez and Associates occupied the 2nd floor of a renovated adobe building on Gold Avenue in downtown Albuquerque, a space where modern efficiency met southwestern charm. Naomi Martinez had been practicing family law for 23 years, her expertise honed through countless cases and hard-fought battles. Her office walls displayed an impressive array of certificates, commendations, and photographs with local politicians and community leaders, a testament to her dedication and standing in the community. She'd represented everyone from impoverished mothers fighting for child support to wealthy executives navigating complicated divorces. But she'd never had 6 members of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club sitting in her meticulously organized conference room. Gentlemen, Naomi said, setting down her coffee mug with a decisive clink on the polished oak table. Thank you for coming in on such short notice. I know Monday afternoons aren't usually ideal. We made it work, Silas said simply, his voice carrying an undercurrent of quiet authority. The 6 of them had arranged themselves around the table with a practiced ease, Weston and Brooks flanking one side, Roman and Ezekiel on the other, and Axel and Silas anchoring the ends. Their leather vests were draped over the backs of their chairs, revealing plain t-shirts and worn jeans, but somehow they still commanded the space with their sheer physical presence and unwavering gazes. Naomi opened a thick folder filled with documents and legal briefs. I've reviewed the video evidence you provided. It's unambiguous. Belle Stevens raised a belt with clear intent to strike a minor child. The fact that you intervened before the blow landed actually strengthens our case. It demonstrates that the threat was real and imminent, not hypothetical. What about her claim that we threatened her? Brooks asked, his demeanor transformed into full-blown accountant mode. Precise, analytical, and laser-focused on the facts. The video directly contradicts that narrative, Naomi said, her voice firm. At no point did any of you make physical contact with her. Your language was firm but not threatening. You identified yourselves as witnesses and offered to call the police. That's textbook intervention, not intimidation. She's hired an attorney. Connor spoke up from his position at the head of the table. He looked visibly exhausted, his face pale and drawn. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his hands were wrapped tightly around a coffee mug, as if it were a lifeline in a stormy sea. Richard Caldwell. He's apparently expensive. Naomi's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, a subtle tightening of the lips that betrayed her professional composure. Caldwell's a shark. He specializes in high-net-worth divorces and has a reputation for aggressive tactics. He'll try to discredit our witnesses, claim parental alienation, possibly even file countermotions alleging that Connor is unstable or being manipulated. Can he actually win with that strategy? Weston asked, his voice a low growl. Not with this evidence, Naomi said firmly, her gaze unwavering. But he can make the process expensive, lengthy, and emotionally damaging. That's his specialty, grinding down opponents until they settle for less than they deserve. Silas leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. What do you need from us? We're here to do whatever it takes. Depositions this week, Naomi said, her voice crisp and professional. All 6 of you individually. Caldwell will try to find inconsistencies in your testimonies. So I need you to be precise and honest. If there's anything in your backgrounds that could be used against you, I need to know now. No surprises. A brief, heavy silence descended upon the conference room, the air thick with unspoken truths. Finally, Silas spoke, his voice devoid of emotion. I've got a record. Assault from a bar fight 12 years ago. Possession with intent from 15 years ago, before I cleaned up my act. Served 18 months total. Naomi made meticulous notes in her legal pad, her pen scratching against the paper. Anyone else? DUI from 2008. Roman admitted, his voice contrite. Completed rehab, haven't touched alcohol since. Disorderly conduct from a protest in 2015. Axel added. Charges were dropped. Nothing that'll tank the case, Naomi said, her tone businesslike. Caldwell will try to use it to paint you as criminals, but your current employment, your community service records, and the clarity of the video evidence will effectively counter that narrative. The conference room door opened, and a young paralegal poked her head in, her voice slightly breathless. Ms. Martinez, Belle Stevens and her attorney are here for the 4 o'clock. Naomi checked her watch, her expression hardening slightly. 3:58. Early. Typical Caldwell power play. Connor, you don't have to be present for this meeting. It's entirely your choice. I want to be, Connor said quietly, his voice filled with grim determination. I want to see her face. Naomi studied him for a moment, her gaze assessing his strength and resolve. Finally, she nodded. Gentlemen, you're welcome to stay as well. This is just a preliminary discussion about settlement terms and temporary custody arrangements. Nothing binding will be decided today. We'll stay, Silas said, and the others nodded in agreement, their faces masks of silent resolve. 2 minutes later, Belle Stevens walked into the conference room, flanked by Richard Caldwell, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Belle looked drastically different from the woman captured in the park video. Her hair was styled professionally into a sleek, sophisticated updo. She wore a conservative navy blue suit that exuded an air of understated power, and her makeup was flawless, meticulously applied to conceal any hint of vulnerability. She transformed herself from a furious, enraged stepmother into a wronged professional woman, seemingly overnight. But as her eyes swept across the 6 bikers, a flicker of genuine fear crossed her face, a fleeting moment of vulnerability before she quickly regained her composure and masked her expression with a practiced air of indignation. Richard Caldwell was exactly what Silas expected, 60 years old, silver hair meticulously coiffed, an expensive, impeccably tailored suit that screamed wealth and power, and a wedding ring that probably cost more than Silas's motorcycle. His eyes were cold and calculating as he methodically assessed the room, his gaze lingering on each of the bikers with a mixture of disdain and suspicion. Miss Martinez, Caldwell said smoothly, his voice dripping with condescension. I wasn't aware this would be such a crowded meeting. My clients have every right to be present. Naomi replied evenly, her tone unwavering. These are the witnesses to the June 3rd incident. I assume you've reviewed the video evidence. I've seen the edited footage, Caldwell said, setting down his leather briefcase with a soft thud. Footage which, quite conveniently, begins mid-confrontation and paints my client in an unfavorable light. The video is unedited. Brooks interjected, his voice sharp and precise. I can provide the original files with complete metadata showing no alterations. We have 6 separate recordings, all time-stamped. Caldwell's eyes flicked to Brooks, his gaze narrowed. And you are? Brooks Patterson, CPA, also a witness to the incident. How convenient that a motorcycle gang member happens to be a CPA, Caldwell said with a thin, barely perceptible smile. Motorcycle club, Weston corrected, his voice a low rumble of warning. Not a gang. We're a registered organization with tax-exempt status for our charity work. Gentlemen. Naomi cut in before the tension could escalate further, her voice sharp and commanding. We're here to discuss temporary custody arrangements for Mila Hayes, pending the divorce proceedings. Mr. Caldwell, your client was. My client was exercising her legal right to discipline a child in her care, Caldwell interrupted, his voice cold and unwavering. The fact that 6 large men surrounded her and intimidated her into dropping a belt doesn't change the fundamental legal reality. Step-parents have disciplinary authority. Not to the point of abuse, Connor said, his voice tight with controlled rage. You weren't there. You didn't see the terror on my daughter's face. Belle spoke for the first time, her voice trembling with carefully crafted emotion. Connor, please, I never meant to hurt Mila. I was just frustrated. She'd been loud all day. My head was pounding, and I just snapped for a moment. But I didn't hit her. I would never actually hit her. Because we stopped you? Silas said flatly, his voice like ice. Belle's eyes filled with perfectly timed, perfectly placed tears. You terrified me. There were 6 of you. I thought you were going to hurt me. I dropped the belt because I was afraid for my life. The video shows otherwise, Naomi said, her voice unwavering. Your body language indicates anger, not fear, and the belt was raised in a striking position before any of my clients approached. Fear manifests differently in different people, Caldwell argued, his voice smooth and persuasive. My client was surrounded by members of a motorcycle gang. Club. All 6 bikers said simultaneously, their voices a chorus of low, menacing growls, and responded appropriately to a threatening situation. Caldwell finished, smoothly ignoring the interruption. Furthermore, we have witnesses of our own. 3 mothers at the park who will testify that the child, Mila, was being disruptive and that Mrs. Stevens was attempting age-appropriate discipline before being accosted. Connor's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles turning white with barely suppressed fury. Those are lies. Complete lies. They weren't even paying attention. Are they? Caldwell pulled out his own tablet and opened a document. Mrs. Jennifer Morrison, stay-at-home mother of 2, states, quote, the little girl was screaming and running wild. Her stepmother was trying to calm her down when those bikers surrounded them. I was frightened for the woman's safety. End quote. Ezekiel leaned forward, his gaze intense. I'd like to see that statement notarized and submitted under penalty of perjury because it directly contradicts what actually happened. You are mistaken on the specific witness. I can provide you her actual recorded testimony. As would your statements? Caldwell shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You have an obvious bias. You've already aligned yourselves with Mr. Hayes. Your testimony is compromised. Our testimony is factual, Roman said, his voice calm and unwavering. We have no relationship with Connor Hayes beyond witnessing his wife attempting to assault his daughter. Stepdaughter. Belle corrected quietly, her voice sharp. And I wasn't assaulting her. I was disciplining her. Disciplining her with a belt? Axel said, his voice filled with quiet fury. Raised to strike in public after grabbing her hard enough to leave bruises. Belle's perfect composure cracked slightly, a flicker of genuine anger betraying her carefully constructed facade. I don't have to justify my parenting to you people. Actually, Naomi said, her voice steely. In family court you do, especially when there's documented evidence of abuse. There's no abuse. Belle's voice rose, genuine anger bleeding through. Now I took that child into my home. I fed her, clothed her, took her to school, and this is how I'm repaid? By being attacked by a gang of criminals and having my marriage destroyed? You took a belt to a 6-year-old for laughing too loud, Silas said, his voice deadly quiet. That's not parenting. That's bullying. You don't know anything about my life. You are mistaken. I loved that child. Belle stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a harsh shriek. You don't know what it's like trying to raise someone else's child while her father works 60 hours a week and leaves everything to me. That man barely raises that child. Then you should have walked away, Connor said, standing as well, his face flushed with anger. You should have told me you couldn't handle it. Instead, you terrorized my daughter and made her afraid in her own home. I gave her structure. I gave her discipline, something you clearly weren't capable of providing. You should be grateful that this girl had the strong women she did. The conference room erupted into overlapping voices, a cacophony of accusations and recriminations. Caldwell was trying to calm Belle, Naomi was calling for order, and Connor and Belle were shouting accusations back and forth, their voices rising in intensity. The 6 bikers remained silent, their faces impassive as they watched the carefully controlled facade crumble into raw, ugly truth. Finally, Naomi's voice cut through the chaos, her tone carrying the weight of absolute authority. Enough. Everyone sit down. Now. The authority in her tone was absolute, silencing the arguments and halting the escalation of emotions. Slowly, Connor and Belle sank back into their chairs, their faces flushed and their bodies tense. Caldwell straightened his tie, his calculated composure slightly warped, betraying the fact that he had not quite expected this eruption. Here's what's going to happen, Naomi said, her voice ice-cold and devoid of emotion. We're filing for emergency temporary custody tomorrow morning. Judge Ramirez will review the video evidence, the witness statements, and the photographic evidence of bruising on Mila's arms. Based on precedent and the strength of our case, I estimate a 90% chance the judge grants full temporary custody to Connor, with supervised visitation only for Belle. You can't? Belle started, her voice filled with disbelief. I'm not finished, Naomi interrupted, her gaze unwavering. If you fight this, Mr. Caldwell, we will pursue criminal charges for child endangerment. We will subpoena school records, medical records, and interview Mila's teachers and pediatrician. We will build a comprehensive case documenting a pattern of abuse. And when we win, because we will win, you will lose not just custody but any visitation rights whatsoever. Caldwell's jaw tightened, his face flushing slightly with anger. That's an aggressive position, Ms. Martinez. It's a protective position, Mr. Caldwell, Naomi said, her voice laced with steel. And I'm prepared to fight with every weapon at my disposal to ensure the safety and well-being of my client. Okay, I understand. Here's the translated and rewritten passage, expanded and deepened as requested. Corrected. My client's daughter has been traumatized, Naomi continued, her voice firm. Every day this drags out is another day the child lives in fear, reliving that moment. She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. So here's my offer. Belle agrees to 0 custody, supervised visitation twice a month at a neutral location chosen by the court, and mandatory anger management counseling, verified by regular reports. In exchange, we won't pursue criminal charges related to the assault. That's absurd, Caldwell retorted, his face reddening. My client has rights as a parent. Weston cut him off, his voice a low growl. Your client raised a weapon, a belt, to a child. In New Mexico, that's aggravated assault, plain and simple. Those rights you're talking about, they evaporate the second you threaten a child's safety. Belle was openly weeping now, the carefully applied facade of makeup dissolving as mascara streaked down her face. I just wanted a family, she sobbed, her voice thick with despair. I just wanted to be enough. For him, for her, for myself. Something in her voice, the raw vulnerability clawing its way through layers of anger and denial, gave Silas pause. He recognized that tone, the desperate plea of someone broken. He'd heard it before, echoing in his own voice during darker times, in the voices of other lost souls who'd made terrible choices in a futile attempt to fill an unfillable void. Then get help, Silas said, his voice softer than anyone in the room expected, not unkindly. Real help. Therapy, anger management, whatever it takes to figure out why you thought hurting a kid was acceptable. But do it far away from Ma, from Connor. Do it where you can't cause any more damage. Belle looked at him, surprise flickering through her tear-filled eyes. For a fleeting moment, she seemed to truly see him, not as a threat, not as an adversary in a legal battle, but as someone who understood, on a fundamental level, the agony of failing the people you were supposed to protect. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she whispered, the words barely audible. Connor cut through the fragile moment of connection. Intentions don't matter when a child is afraid, Belle. Results matter. And the result is that my daughter flinches when someone raises their voice, when a door slams. That's on you, Belle. That's all on you. The weight of his words hung in the air. The conference room fell silent. The only sound the quiet hum of the air conditioning struggling to keep pace with the tension in the room. Outside, traffic flowed through downtown Albuquerque, a stream of ordinary lives oblivious to the devastating domestic tragedy unfolding within the sterile confines of the second-floor law office. Caldwell, regaining his composure, gathered his papers with controlled precision, a mask of professional detachment firmly in place. We'll need time to review your offer and consult with our client. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow, Naomi stated, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. After that, we file motions, and we let the judge decide what's best for Ma. Understood. Caldwell stood, offering Belle a steadying hand and guiding her towards the door. She looked back once at Connor, her face a ravaged landscape of smudged makeup and genuine anguish. I'm sorry, she choked out, the word a mere breath. Connor didn't respond, his face a stony mask. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, Belle and Caldwell exited the room, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt palpable. The door clicked shut, and the remaining occupants of the conference room released a collective breath they hadn't realized they were holding. That went better than expected, Naomi said dryly, a hint of weariness in her voice. Did it? Connor asked, running a hand through his hair. Because I feel like I just watched someone self-destruct in slow motion. Sometimes that's what winning looks like, Connor, Naomi replied, her expression softening slightly. Messy, painful, but necessary. The judge will see that video, the statements, and understand exactly what we're dealing with. The truth will come out. Connor dropped his head into his hands, his shoulders slumping with exhaustion. I married her. I brought her into Ma's life. This is my fault. No, Silas said firmly, his voice brooking no argument. Abusers are skilled at hiding what they are. You're not responsible for her choices, Connor. You're not responsible for her darkness. But my daughter suffered because I was blind, Connor countered, his voice laced with self-reproach. And now your daughter is protected because you opened your eyes, Weston pointed out, his hand resting briefly on Connor's shoulder. Stop punishing yourself, brother, and focus on what comes next. Connor looked up at the 6 men who'd become his unlikely allies, brothers in a fight he never saw coming. Why are you still here? You did your part. You witnessed, you reported, you testified. You don't owe us anything more. We're here because we choose to be, Roman said simply, his gaze direct and unwavering. That's how this works. Brotherhood. Ezekiel added, his voice resonating with sincerity. It's not just about the club, Connor. It's about standing with people who need standing with, about protecting the innocent. Connor's eyes filled with tears he was too exhausted to hide. I don't know how I'm supposed to repay this, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Be a good father, Connor, Silas said, his voice gentle but firm. That's all the repayment we need. Be present. Be protective. Be what that little girl needs you to be. Naomi started packing up her files, the click of the briefcase snapping the moment. Gentlemen, I'll need those depositions finalized by the end of the week. I'll have my paralegal coordinate schedules. Connor, take the rest of the day off. Spend time with Ma. Let her know she's safe, that you're there. As they filed out of the conference room, Silas felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. A text message from an unknown number. He pulled it out and read, "This is Emma. Dad's number hasn't changed in 8 years. Figured I'd try it. So, a news article about Hell's Angels protecting a kid in a park. That you?" Silas stopped walking so abruptly that Axel nearly collided with him. You okay, brother? Axel asked, concern etched on his face. Silas stared at the message, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with confrontation or anger. 8 years. 8 years of silence, and now this. He typed back with shaking hands. Yeah, that was me. The response came almost immediately. Can we talk? Silas looked up at his brothers, at Connor gathering his things, at the late afternoon sun streaming through the office windows, casting long shadows across the room. Some broken things could be fixed, some wounds could heal, some distances could be crossed. Yes, he typed. We can talk. 3 months later, Roosevelt Park looked almost exactly the same as it had on that Saturday afternoon in June when everything had changed. Same playground equipment, same scattered families enjoying the mild September weather, same breathtaking view of the Sandia Mountains turning a soft purple in the late afternoon light. But beneath the surface, everything was profoundly different. Ma Hayes ran through the playground with absolute abandon, her laughter ringing out, as loud and joyful as any child should be. She'd gained weight, filling out the hollow spaces that had haunted her face. The haunted look in her eyes had vanished, replaced by a spark of joy, and she moved with the confidence of someone who no longer expected punishment for expressing happiness. 3 other children ran with her, caught up in some elaborate game involving pirates and buried treasure that made perfect sense to them. Connor sat on a nearby bench, watching his daughter, his phone in his hand, displaying a text exchange with his supervisor at the hospital. He'd reduced his hours to part-time, using savings and Belle's court-ordered child support payments to make ends meet while dedicating more time to Ma. The financial strain was real, a constant undercurrent of worry, but the newfound peace in his home, the light in his daughter's eyes, was worth every sacrifice. Silas approached from the parking lot, moving with the careful awareness of someone who understood that his presence might not always be welcome. That trust was a fragile thing, easily broken. Connor saw him coming and smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. That was different, too. 3 months ago, that smile would have been unimaginable. She looks good, Silas said, settling onto the bench without asking permission. They'd moved past formalities months ago, their bond forged in the crucible of shared experience. She is good, Connor confirmed, his voice filled with pride. Her therapist says she's making incredible progress. The nightmares have mostly stopped. She's sleeping through the night. And Belle? Silas asked, his voice carefully neutral. Connor's expression hardened slightly, a shadow passing over his face. Supervised visitation twice a month, 1 hour each time. She's actually been showing up, which surprised me, to be honest. Her therapist reports she's engaging with the anger management program, at least superficially. People can change, Connor, Silas observed quietly, watching Ma play. Not always, maybe not completely, but sometimes enough to make a difference. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Mila play, the sounds of children's laughter washing over them. After a while, Connor spoke again, his voice hesitant. Your daughter Emma, you seeing her this weekend? Saturday, Silas confirmed, and there was something fragile and hopeful in his voice, a yearning that he couldn't quite mask. Coffee in Santa Fe. She's driving down from Oregon for a conference at the university. Figured we could talk, see if there's anything left to salvage. That's good, man, Connor said, clapping Silas on the shoulder. That's really good. I hope it goes well. We'll see, Silas said cautiously, tempering his hope with a dose of realism. 8 years is a long time. I'm not the same person I was, and she's not the same kid, but we're going to try, for both our sakes. A motorcycle rumbled into the parking lot, the distinctive growl of Weston's blacked-out road glide unmistakable. He parked next to Silas's bike, dismounted and walked over to join them, a wry smile playing on his lips. Gentlemen, Weston greeted, settling onto the bench with a sigh. How's the princess? Perfect, Connor said, his eyes fixed on Ma, a soft smile gracing his lips. Absolutely perfect. They watched as Mila noticed Silas and came running over, her friends trailing behind her. Silas, you came, she exclaimed, throwing her arms around his neck. Told you I would, didn't I? Silas said, ruffling her hair. Wouldn't miss seeing you at your favorite park. Are the other guys coming? Mila asked hopefully, her eyes scanning the parking lot. Over the past 3 months, she'd become something of a mascot for the motorcycle club, a ray of sunshine in their often dark world. The 6 men who'd intervened that day had made a point of staying in her life, taking her and Connor to club events, teaching her about bikes, making sure she knew she had protectors beyond just her father. Brooks is working late, Weston said, checking his watch. Client meeting ran over, but Roman, Ezekiel, and Axel are meeting us at the diner later. You still want pancakes for dinner? Always, Mila declared, then ran back to her friends, eager to resume their game. Connor shook his head in amazement, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. I still can't believe this is my life. 3 months ago, I was married to an abuser and blind to my daughter's suffering. Now I'm sitting in a park with Hell's Angels who've become my closest friends, watching my kid be happy. It's surreal. Life's weird, Connor, Weston agreed, his gaze following Mila as she ran across the playground, full of unexpected turns. You just gotta learn to roll with the punches. A woman approached the bench, mid-30s, dressed in professional clothing, carrying a briefcase. She hesitated for a moment, her expression a mixture of apprehension and determination. Connor Hayes? Connor stood immediately, his body language shifting to a protective stance, his eyes narrowing. Yes, who are you? I'm Jennifer Morrison, the woman said, her voice trembling slightly. I was one of the witnesses who gave a statement to Belle's attorney. She paused, taking a deep breath. I wanted to apologize. The silence that followed was heavy with judgment, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Finally, Silas spoke, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Took you 3 months to find a conscience. Jennifer flinched as if struck, but didn't look away. I was scared. Belle and I were in the same yoga class. Our kids went to the same school. She was always so put together, so perfect. When her attorney approached me, he made it sound like she was the victim, like she was being attacked by a motorcycle gang. Club, Weston corrected automatically, his voice a low rumble. I know that now, Jennifer said, her gaze fixed on Connor. I've been following the case. I saw the video. I saw what actually happened, and I realized I lied because it was easier than admitting I'd stood by and done nothing while a child was about to be hurt. So what do you want? Connor asked, his voice cold and hard. A pat on the back? Absolution. Jennifer shook her head, her eyes filled with remorse. No, I want to give a new statement to your attorney. The truth this time. What I actually saw before those men intervened. Belle grabbing Mila hard enough to hurt her. The terror on that little girl's face. The belt being raised. All of it. Connor studied her for a long moment, searching her eyes for any sign of deception. Why now, Jennifer? Why after all this time? Because I have a daughter, too, Jennifer said, her voice breaking with emotion. She's 7. And I keep thinking, what if it was her? What if she was being hurt, and 20 adults looked away because it wasn't their problem? I can't undo what I did, but I can at least stop adding to the lie. Silas stood up and pulled out his phone. I'll call Naomi Martinez. She'll want to take your statement officially. As Silas walked away to make the call, Jennifer looked at Connor, her eyes filled with unshed tears. I'm sorry, Connor. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm truly sorry. Connor was quiet for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. Thank you for coming forward. Now, 20 minutes later, Naomi Martinez was on her way to the park with a portable recorder and a grim determination. Jennifer gave her a detailed statement, sitting at a picnic table while Mila played in the distance, blissfully unaware that another piece of her protection was being secured. When the legal formalities were done, and Jennifer had left, lighter somehow, as if confession had physically unburdened her, Connor, Silas, and Weston remained at the park as the sun began its slow descent toward the desert horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange, pink, and gold. You think people are basically good? Connor asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Silas considered the question seriously, his brow furrowed in thought. I think people are basically selfish, driven by their own needs and desires. But I also think most of them can be better, when they try, when someone forces them to look at themselves honestly and confront their own shortcomings. That's pretty philosophical for a biker, Connor observed with a slight smile, a hint of his old humor returning. We have a lot of time to think on long rides, Silas said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Hours of nothing but road and your own thoughts makes you either wise or crazy. Or both, I guess. Definitely both, Weston added with a grin. They watched as the park began to empty, families heading home for dinner, children being called away from play with promises of returning tomorrow. Mila ran over one more time, breathless and happy, her face flushed with exertion. Dad, can we have pancakes now? I'm starving. Let's go, Connor said, standing and taking her hand. But you have to eat vegetables too. Do French fries count as vegetables? Mila asked hopefully, batting her eyelashes. Nice try, kiddo, Connor said laughing. You're not getting off that easy. The drive to the Route 66 diner was short, Connor and Mila in his sedan, Silas and Weston on their bikes, their engines rumbling behind. When they pulled into the parking lot, Roman, Ezekiel and Axel were already there. Their motorcycles lined up in a neat row, gleaming under the streetlights. Inside, the waitress who'd served them 3 months ago, a kind-faced woman with a warm smile, beamed when she saw the group. Your usual booth, gentlemen? Please, Connor said, returning her smile. They settled into the familiar booth, Mila wedged between Connor and Silas, the other bikers spreading out around the table, their presence a reassuring shield. Orders were placed. Pancakes for Mila, burgers and fries for most of the men, chicken salad for Connor, who was trying, albeit unsuccessfully, to eat healthier. While they waited for the food, Brooks arrived directly from his accounting firm, still wearing a suit and tie, his hair slightly disheveled. Sorry I'm late, guys. Client meeting ran over. You're forgiven, Roman said, clapping him on the shoulder. But you're buying dessert. The conversation flowed easily, a comfortable mix of shop talk about motorcycles and maintenance. Connor's stories from the ER, plans for an upcoming charity ride to support veterans. Mila colored on her kids' menu, occasionally interjecting with observations that made the adults laugh, her presence a reminder of what they were fighting for. At one point, she looked up at Silas, her eyes wide and innocent. Are you nervous about seeing Emma on Saturday? The table went quiet, the easy chatter abruptly ceasing. All eyes turned to Silas, their faces filled with concern. Silas met the child's gaze, so direct, so perceptive beyond her years. Yeah, sweetheart, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I'm pretty nervous. That's okay, Mila said matter-of-factly, shrugging her small shoulders. My therapist says it's normal to be nervous about important things. It means you care. Your therapist is a smart lady, Silas said, his voice thick with emotion. She says you're a hero, Mila continued, her voice unwavering. I told her about how you stopped Belle, and she said people who protect children are heroes, even if they don't think they are. Silas's throat tightened, and he looked away, unable to meet the child's unwavering gaze. I'm not a hero, Mila. I just did what anyone should do. But most people didn't, Mila said, her voice small but firm. You did. That makes you a hero. Weston cleared his throat roughly, breaking the heavy silence. Kid's got a point, brother. The food arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. But Silas felt something settle in his chest. A sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. He wasn't redeemed. Redemption was too grand a concept for someone with his history of mistakes and failures. But he was useful. He was present. He was making amends in small, concrete ways, one act of kindness, one act of protection at a time. After dinner, they walked out into the parking lot, where the September evening had cooled to a perfect riding temperature, the air crisp and clean. Connor loaded a sleepy Mila into his car while the bikers prepared to ride back to the clubhouse, the rumble of their engines filling the air. Before mounting his bike, Silas walked over to Connor's driver's side window, leaning down to meet his gaze. Saturday, when I meet Emma, can I tell her about Mila? About what we did here? About the kind of man you are? Connor smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that lit up his face. I think she already knows, Silas. But yeah, tell her. Tell her she's got a good father who's trying to make up for lost time. Tell her about the brothers who helped us along the way. Thanks, brother, Silas said, his voice choked with emotion. No, Connor said firmly, reaching out to clasp Silas's hand through the car window. Thank you, Silas, for everything. For saving my daughter, for saving me. They shook hands, an imperfect bond forged in crisis, strengthened through months of showing up, of being present, of choosing to care when it would have been easier to look away. As Connor drove away with Mila asleep in the back seat, the 6 motorcycles started in sequence, a synchronized rumble that echoed off the buildings along Central Avenue. They pulled out onto Route 66, heading west toward the clubhouse, riding information like they'd done 1,000 times before, but this time felt different. This time they carried with them the knowledge that sometimes the smallest acts of courage, stopping in a parking lot, making a phone call, refusing to look away, could alter the trajectory of lives, could tip the balance between despair and hope. Silas thought about Saturday, about sitting across from Emma in a coffee shop in Santa Fe, about trying to explain 8 years of absence and the slow, painful process of becoming someone worth knowing. He thought about Mila's therapy bills that the club had quietly helped Connor pay, a silent act of solidarity. He thought about Jennifer Morrison's confession and how shame could sometimes transform into accountability, how even the most reluctant hearts could be moved to do the right thing. He thought about all the children in parks everywhere who needed someone to intervene, someone to stand between them and harm, and all the adults who walked past because it wasn't their problem. And he thought about the unwritten code that governed his life now, the principle that had crystallized that day in June, a guiding star in the darkness. The strong defend the defenseless. No matter the cost, no exceptions, no hesitation, no looking away. The 6 motorcycles disappeared into the Albuquerque evening, their engine rumble fading into the desert night, leaving behind a trail of hope and redemption. Behind them, a little girl slept safely in her father's car, dreaming dreams unmarred by fear. It was enough.